Where are we? All right. And hello, South Florida. Welcome to another edition of the Real Estate Show, another live edition here featured Monday through Friday from 5 p.m. That's 5 days a week, 5 p.m. in the evening, and also available 5 different channels on the AM dial, the FM dial, on the free smartphone or smart device apps like iHeartRadio, the TuneIn, radio.com, on our website, automaticlandlord.com. That's automaticlandlord.com, as well as on Facebook. So on Facebook Live, you can join us there as well. Just look for The Real Estate Show, and you'll catch us there live Monday through Friday. On the last two, on the automaticlandlord.com and on the website, you can also go there at your convenience on demand, because all of these shows are recorded and then archived along with the radio show notes. So you can get a quick summary of what we talked about on the radio show, and a link that allows you to listen to the radio show in its entirety, and a link that allows you to download the podcast version and take the radio show with you offline as well. So we got a great show for you today as we continue this week talking about the end of the moratorium, the eviction moratorium, the end of the foreclosure moratorium. And I imagine that many of you are sort of holding your breath right now to figure out what's going to happen next. What does this mean for the marketplace? So far, not much. And in fact, we started off the week talking about, defining what the eviction moratorium was, explaining why it mattered, who was behind it. And then, of course, watching, we spoke here on the radio show a couple of weeks back when the CDC announced that it was not going to renew their moratorium, and they were invoking their powers based on a public health issue. Now, with 70% of the population vaccinated, they no longer feel that it's their place. And add to that, the Supreme Court ruling that they didn't have the authority to do so in the first place. So in both of those cases, like we said, the CDC was no longer going to be relied upon in order to extend things. It was up to the government, the House and the Senate, to decide, and of course the president. And here's an interesting thing that came up in news conversation today: does the president have the authority to invoke the moratorium again, and not without the House and the Senate? So that's another debate. So he reached out to the CDC and asked them to add or temporarily extend their moratorium, and their response was no. And their response was not only because I guess they don't feel that it's necessary, but they were saying they're not sure they have the authority to do so. So they decided they would rather not tread in those waters. So yesterday, I gave you a link if you wanted to get more information about the eviction moratorium, and more importantly, the resources that are available. Because in addition to this radio show, we wanted to go ahead and share with you a number of other resources. And if you want a list of those resources, then text the word discovery so that you can discover what's available to you to our smart text line. And our smart text line number is 561-861-2366. That's 561-861-2366. And then we'll follow up with sending you some of those links, and it'll ask you your name and your email so that and where you are, so they can send you the right information for your area, because there's different information based on state for sure. And yesterday we talked also about how some states, in spite of the federal moratorium being lifted, that the certain states were going to continue to limit the proceedings for several more months, some into the next year. I talked yesterday about an interesting interview that I heard on the media, where they had interviewed somebody who, when they asked, well, what do they think about the moratorium expiring? They go, well, they didn't think it was going to happen so soon. And my answer to that is, it's already been 17 months. How much longer do you think we needed to have this? And in the cases where I think that it's not being abused, there are resources out there for you. And so you got to be proactive. You can't just sit there and wait for everything to just be taken care of for you. So if you want to find more about, remember, listen to yesterday's show. There's a ton of great information. I listed some of those those resources there for you. Kind of an interesting sort of sidebar. And we talked a little bit about this a couple of weeks ago. We talked about why that the expiration of these moratoriums, both the eviction and the foreclosure moratorium, which is why many people were granted forbearance. Another technical term here in the mortgage industry, forbearance is when you're allowed to defer, not forgiven. And by the way, nothing was forgiven. So for those folks that are taking advantage of this and thinking, well, free rent for everybody for as long as we can get it, it wasn't free rent. It was merely a deferral. And so the mortgage holders are going to expect their mortgage payments from the property owners, and the landlords are going to be expecting their payments as well. So a couple of things that we should know for mainly the purpose of wondering what's happening next in the marketplace. A lot of landlords and a lot of lenders went ahead on Monday and filed the evictions and the foreclosures as they are now permitted to do, with the exception of the states that I mentioned, most of them, about 10 states that I talked about yesterday. And I would look into your local area as well to find out what applies to you specifically, because it's not one nationwide thing. It is, the nationwide has been lifted state by state and perhaps even county by county. So number one, just keep this in mind. There's a lot of money on the sidelines looking for opportunities. So I think that any spike in inventory will be pretty quickly absorbed. Number one. Number two, quite honestly, there are fewer homeowners in trouble, certainly way less than what we saw in 2007, 2008, and during that period. So if you're expecting the housing bubble, like here we go again, this is not a deja vu all over again. After the last housing crash, about 9.3 million households lost their homes to a foreclosure, which is huge. That's a huge number. 9.3 million people lost it to foreclosure, to short sale, or simply because they handed the keys back to their lenders. Now, this time we had these stay-at-home orders issued last year. The overwhelming fear was that the pandemic would decimate the housing industry in a similar way. And many experts projected 30% of all mortgage holders enter the forbearance programs, but only about 8.5%. So less than 30% actually went into forbearance that were expected to go. And now that number is below 3.5%. Let me just remind you that historically, over the long term, about 2.5% in foreclosure is considered a normal, manageable number. So again, not seeing that bubble. As of a week ago, the total number of mortgages still in forbearance was about 1.8 million. And that's definitely a large number. but nowhere near the 9.3 million that went into foreclosure the last housing crisis. Most of those, by the way, and here's the second reason why there's a lot less concern here about a housing bubble. Most of that 1.86 million in forbearance have enough equity to sell their homes. So if they plan accordingly, then they can actually get out of this gracefully without decimating their credit, without and ps I've got a solution for that too. So if you're out there wondering what's it going to do to your credit, then for a response to that one, text the word credit to 561-861-2366. That's 561-861-2366. And I'll tell you a story about how we improved one person's credit all the way up to 760 in the middle of the pandemic. That's right. And so text the word credit to 561-861-2366. So in of those people in forbearance now, 87% of them, think about this. This is a very powerful statistic. 87% have at least 10% equity, which means that they can easily sell, pay the closing costs, pay the realtors to sell it, and still not walk away with a deficiency or not be at risk of a deficiency or a short sale. The 10% equity number is important because it enables homeowners to sell their homes and pay the related expenses instead of facing the hit on their own credit for a foreclosure or a short sale. Now, 87% have at least 10% equity. The remaining 13% might not all have the option to sell. Some of the entire 13% of that 1.86 million will go in the foreclosure. Remember, in the best, hottest economy that we had right before the pandemic was declared March a year ago, there were people in foreclosure at that time. There were people with list pendencies at that time. And yes, there were people in the process of getting evicted. Can you imagine getting saved by the bell and then riding out another year and a half because your landlord couldn't evict you? And my heart goes out to those landlords. It honestly does. These are mom and pop people who invested their life savings to buy some real estate and got caught in a once in a generation situation that I hope, for all of the reasons, never repeats itself. Certainly not for another 100 years at least. So to give that number context, the annual number of foreclosures in each of the 3 years leading up to the pandemic, right? Because 13% of the 1.86 would be 241,000. In 2019, which was a great year in the market, right? We were recovering and gaining steam. In 2019, we had 277,000 compared with the 241 that would represent the 13%. In 2018, again, recovery, 279,000. And in 2017, when right after the election and all that turmoil and everything that was going on, 314,000. So we're actually have less people potentially going into foreclosure now than we did in the 3 years preceding. So again, not my feeling that we're going to have that big wave of foreclosures. And like I said, the current market can definitely absorb any listings. We're short on inventory as it stands. We're still, I think we're teetering on the edge of affordability becoming a major issue, but it's still affordable with interest rates at record lows right now and a lot of money, like I said, on the sideline. And furthermore, if you have been paying any attention to the political scenario out there, you know that those in power will do whatever is necessary to prevent a wave of foreclosures. In fact, that's a conversation I'm not even going to get into here on the Real Estate Show, because line is that I don't think that we're going to see a big wave of foreclosures. So I want to come back. When we come back from our break, I want to talk a little bit about the CDC and the little battle between the CDC and the White House. Who wants the CDC to reinstate the COVID-19 eviction moratorium? And then let's talk a little bit more about what else you can do here. You're listening to The Real Estate Show. My name is Eric Willner. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. I think we had people calling in instead of texting in. And welcome back. For those of you just joining us here on The Real Estate Show, my name is Eric Willner. I'm the host of The Real Estate Show, South Florida's #1 program about real estate and America's longest running daily radio show about real estate. And we've been focusing this week on I think the top thing that many homeowners, tenants, and landlords are wondering about right now is what's next. You know, the moratorium has expired. It is officially over and no longer in force, with the relatively few exceptions on a state-by-state basis, about 10 states out of 50. So think about it, less than 20% of the states now have an additional restriction. But the White House reached out today to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, and they turned down the president's request for a new scaled down pandemic related moratorium on residential. Keep in mind, every word counts, on residential evictions, citing a lack of authority to take action. Now, the previous moratorium, which protected millions of Americans behind on their rent from being tossed out of their homes and apartments, expired at midnight on Saturday. Of course, that gives you an extra day, Sunday, to try to figure out what's going on. And Monday, the evictions started rolling into the courthouses. The foreclosures started rolling into the courthouses. And of course, you know, that will take a little bit of time, but you can be pretty certain that that everybody now 17 months without payments is pretty anxious to get back to business as usual and let the market do what it does. This may require some people to get back to work who have been staying at home, collecting the unemployment check in lieu of work. And that was okay when you didn't have a mortgage payment or a rent payment to make. So I imagine that'll actually be good for the employers out there that have been struggling to get employees to show up. The House of Representatives, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, early on Monday pressed Biden to have his administration renew the ban without congressional action, which is kind of funny. Like, everybody wants you to do it. The president wants the CDC to do it. Congress wants the president to do it. But everybody knows that this is really a political hot potato. Biden asked the CDC to target a new moratorium now, since they turned him down on the national one. A new moratorium on the counties with the higher COVID-19 case rates. So they're going to try to use that as a lever if possible. And furthermore, and this is, you know, some of this is already out in print. The White House official said Biden has not given up on, as he asked officials to look at any potential authority to reinstate. And I heard that there's an announcement coming fairly soon. But let me just put this in the perspective for everybody, you know, good, bad, and the ugly out there. For landlords, I would go ahead and proceed as normal, but this is probably a good time to seek good legal counsel. And if you want to find out how to get legal counsel at bargain basement prices, text the word discovery. This is all this week. We're going to just use the word discovery to get information about how to deal with the moratorium. And then we'll have a conversation, figure out which side of the coin, landlord, tenant, bank, or homeowner that it applies to. The White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, she said that the president has not given up the option of legal action on his part. He asked his team to kick the tires, look at every authority, every option that they have to keep more people in their homes. And P.S., for those legitimately affected by the COVID, I think that's great. For those legitimately seeking the help because they have no other options, I'm for this. But for those who this is the path or the easiest way out and a sense of entitlement, those folks don't have my sympathy at all. Now, she noted earlier that the CDC has been unable to find legal authority for a new targeted eviction moratorium. And I think that the CDC, especially after the most recent ruling stating that they didn't have the authority to do the last one, they're not going to overstep this time, because that could have some serious negative ramifications for the future of the CDC, which has already come under fire for a whole bunch of other things. They did say that their team is redoubling efforts to identify all available, this is the White House, by the way, so that they could find all legal actions that might be available to them. But they know that the Supreme Court opinion last month indicated that legislative approval would be required to impose a new moratorium, which means it might come all the way back to Nancy Pelosi, who was trying to get somebody else to do it, because, like I said, this is going to be a political hot potato from all sides on this one. So the president then called on the states, and of course, 10 of them have already acted in the way that he would like. And I think it's in everybody's best interest to have what I call a soft landing. Now, what will be will have to be. There's no such thing as a free lunch. The government can't afford to pay everybody's rent, and landlords can't afford to pay their tenants' rent, and especially they can't afford to pay their tenants' rent and pay a mortgage payment. So what will be. But a soft landing certainly benefits the economy as a whole, the country as a whole, and hopefully everybody as a whole there. So obviously, all eyes are going to turn now, I think, to Congress to see what they will do, whether it's a temporary action or a more extended, as the case numbers have been rising a little bit. There's a whole bunch of factors out there. But get the resources. Text the word discovery to 561-861-2366. That's 561-861-2366. And let's try to figure this out. And there's 9 different ways to avoid foreclosure at the end of the day. There's not as many ways to avoid eviction, but you should be aware of the resources that help you to avoid that out there that do exist. So that's it for today. Remember, text the word discovery to 561-861-2366. The information is free. There's no obligation for anything. This is just purely information for your benefit. Anyway, that's it for today's show. Tomorrow we have our midweek report. We'll be getting more updates, and we'll be following this very, very closely. So until then, this is your host, Eric Willner, signing off. Drive safe, wash those hands, and make it a great day. Bye-bye. And there we go.